Okay, today we're joined by State Senator Nate Blouin. Senator Blouin represents Senate District 13, which consists of parts of Salt Lake City, South Salt Lake, and Murray. Since being elected to the Utah Legislature in 2022, he has emerged as one of the most outspoken advocates of progressive solutions to Utah's most pressing climate issues. In this episode, we will discuss some of the work that makes Senator Blouin and other Democrats at the legislature, work they've been doing to make our state's future prosperous for all Utahns. And we'll also talk about what it's like to run for public office. We'll delve into Utah's political landscape and discuss statewide challenges that shape our state's political discourse, as well as what the future of Utah's political environment will be. So thank you. Did I say your last name right, Blouin?
Oh, yeah, you nailed it.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
someone that has a challenging, no, yours is very easy. It's phonetic. Mine is, we're going to work on a I like Gleich campaign for name recognition. It's
Wasn't
a
that
challenging one.
Wasn't that Eisenhower?
Yes, we're redoing that video from 1952.
That's so good.
Yeah, so that will come out hopefully next week. But
Nice. Love it.
thanks so much for taking the time to join me. I know it's a busy summer, and especially with your hands full with a new puppy, so I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. It's great to chat, and yeah, we've got a lot of common interests, so I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah.
Oh, I should say, I think you missed Mill Creek on my intro, so don't forget I represent Mill Creek as well.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for that
I
reminder.
actually live in Mill Creek.
Okay. Nice. What inspired you to run for public office? Because I know you're a big outdoors person, backcountry skier, trail runner. I bet you do a lot of different outdoor activities. And so what everybody asks me, why? Why would you do this to yourself?
I know it. Yeah, it gets in the way of outdoor, pursuits a little bit, especially with session being in January to March. The backcountry ski time is a little bit limited. Okay, buddy, you're whining, so you're gonna have to go. Go take a chill pill. Okay, we're good. So yeah, legislative session, in January to March, right in the middle of winter. Still get some ski time during the weekends and all that, but it's a worthwhile trade-off. I moved to Utah in 2009 to ski. I mean, that's what brought me here, was being so close to the mountains in Salt Lake City. And I did that for a couple of years, and then I went back to college, finished up degrees, all that sort of fun stuff. And just saw an opportunity to represent, I think a constituency that felt underrepresented in the legislature. We've got a number of those in Utah. But in the district I represent, particularly, there was, someone who had been in office for decades, literally. Utah is one of the youngest states in the nation. I think we need younger representation up there, and just feeling like, progressive voices in particular, especially in a spot like Salt Lake City and the surrounding cities, just didn't have strong voices up there. We need to tell people what we're going to be able to do if we are able to, when we are able to get some semblance of power here in Utah, because there's just such a lack of balance in the state with the supermajority, and hopefully we'll see things change in the coming days, coming years, I guess, as far as that goes. But there's some people have like this specific moment they can point back to that they're like, that's, I had a medical emergency, a bankruptcy, family member got sick, so, they were experiencing some sort of crisis in their life, or saw some like really specific thing they wanted to work on. And I think that's really awesome, and that's important to have folks like that. For me, it was kind of being involved in politics for a couple of years, and seeing opportunities to bring something new to the table, and then kind of things fit into place at the right time. And I was able to run a good, successful campaign. And so here we are.
That's so awesome. We're so grateful to have your voice at the Utah State Legislature. And for those listeners out there who aren't familiar, our Utah State Legislature it's a citizen legislature. So it's a 45-day legislative session packed into January to March. And I think the intention there was to have people that have normal jobs that are part of the community. And it makes it it's got pros and cons, right? I mean, it's great probably for you as a state senator, but as like a community organizer and advocate, it's so hard to follow the legislative session because things happen so quickly and it's hard to get up there for public comment. And what's your other job?
Yeah, so very recently, actually, I've been starting to do some kind of climate communications work for a firm that works with progressive campaigns, progressive organizations to talk about a number of different climate issues around the country. It's kind of cool. I've always been really focused on energy issues in particular here in the West, and so to get to take some of that experience and try and bring it to some other regions and learn about what other regions are doing is really cool. So I'm excited to work in that space, and communications are my kind of passion. My undergraduate degree is in writing and rhetoric studies, so to get to use the writing skills is fun, and it's not something I've got to do in a professional capacity in a long time. So I'm excited.
That's cool. So did you always want to run for office?
No, I mean, I moved to I moved to Utah. Well, so I grew up in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire's got, a really interesting political background as formerly the first primary state. I don't know if that's going forward. I know there's been talk about changing that, and there should be. New Hampshire's also not a very representative state. I think, aside from Utah, it is one of the least diverse states in the country. And so to have that outside voice it was great living there. I mean, I grew up in a town of about 4,000 or 5,000 people. We had a little college there, and the presidential candidates would come through that little town every 4 years, and for the primaries, and so we get to hear them in little town hall settings. And my parents were pretty political, active on some environmental and kind of justice and peace issues. My mom actually got arrested protesting nuclear power way back in the day, so I'll leave that from a policy perspective, the judgment there out, but it certainly runs in the family a little bit. So yeah, I moved here, had that experience, but never was really all that politically active until 2016. I think when a lot of folks kind of in the millennial age range really got more active in politics and started working in some campaigns and found a group of people that I was excited to work with, and it seemed like really important work to be doing, and then found that there's this lack of representation, especially of young people, I think, in Utah, and in the youngest state in the nation. So it kind of that pathway opened up, and it seemed like a good opportunity that I was able to take.
So I wanted to talk about the Great Salt Lake because I know you guys, this has been something that you've been talking about a lot at the state legislature. And do you, these solutions that they've enacted and some of the funding for it, I think you've said that they're ineffective or don't go far enough. And so what do you think are some of the issues with our state legislature's approach to environmental issues? And if you want to speak to our congressional delegation as well, I'm sure that you have some inside understanding too of how the state legislature works with our federal reps.
Yeah, so it's an interesting time right now with all these kind of Supreme Court decisions, the Chevron doctrine kicking a lot of the rules and regulations that get made by federal agencies. It puts them into jeopardy. It potentially means Congress is going to have to be a lot more careful and use a lot more oversight than they have in the past as they're writing legislation. And the state has been picking up on that as well, and essentially passing legislation saying we're ready for Chevron to get overturned. We are ready to start essentially killing off these regulations that we've had. These they call them burdensome regulations, federal government overreach, all that sort of stuff. And so the state is ready to unleash, I think, just a flurry of new development activity, mining and all that sort of stuff, extraction and fossil fuel combustion. All those things are like back in play with some of these regulations getting attacked at the federal level, and so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm not real confident that Utah is going to take some of the proactive steps to really make sure that we are safe and healthy as a community. I mean, there's been so much talk about the Great Salt Lake and the potential issues there with, I mean, mainly with dust. I mean, I think that's the big thing is the issues as the lake level gets lower, the shoreline gets exposed, and just all of the nasty stuff that gets swept into the lake by our water. Just sits there. You know, we've got mines up in the mountains and it sweeps that stuff in and all sorts of other fun chemicals. So that's a disaster in progress, I would say. The legislature's done a lot. I would say the legislature's done a lot to try and address the Great Salt Lake specifically. A lot of funding that's going to go to agricultural operations to optimize their farming, their watering systems, to install meters. A lot of these places were using water systems that didn't even have metering, so they just use water as much as they had access to, and not really track it or have any sort of data there. And so actually just metering is a huge opportunity to save water. That's good. But there are still huge opportunities to move us in the right direction. You know, a lot of these policies that we've enacted around kind of changing the way some of the water law itself works, which goes back a century or more. They're going to take time to actually have an impact. And we've seen the lake climb a little bit in the last couple of years, but that's just good water years. I mean, that's all it is. Like there's no, to my knowledge, I've not had anyone be able to say, okay, this amount of water made it to the lake because of legislation that was passed. I think it is pretty safe to say that it was all about a couple of really good water years in a row. And so that's kind of a blessing and a curse, because it turns people away from thinking about it every day. And we still do need to be, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, just flying, like when I'm traveling in and out of Salt Lake, just seeing Antelope Island. I mean, it's not an island anymore. You could walk to it. And it's, even though we've had 2 good years, the lake is still pretty decimated. And those dust events, they're not a thing of the future. Like we're already seeing them now. And so it would also be great to get more monitoring and public health alerts and things for when we're having those dust events, because it's hard to tell like what's just a big dark cloud and what's the dangerous particulate dust.
I know some of there have been some good actions on monitoring, and actually those were, I believe, passed and supported by Democrats. I think it was Senator Escamilla and Representative Romero that have worked closely on getting some money for monitoring systems that are going to help with those alerts and help track some of that issue with the dust out there. So that's going to be that's a big deal to give people a warning, because right now, yeah, like you said, there's just no warning when that stuff comes in off the lake.
Yeah, I mean, I think the University of Utah, Dr. Mackenzie Skiles did a study that showed that the dust is causing our snowpack to melt like 2 or 3 weeks earlier than normal, because when that dark matter hits the snow and then the sun, it just really speeds up it accelerates the melting of our snowpack. So a lot of those impacts are already happening, and the metering is really interesting. That's a good one. I'm like, I would like to have a better metering at my house, because it's there's so many ways in which we're like very disconnected from the impact we have, whether it's like our electricity bill, we just get it once a month, and it's hard for us to know how we can conserve. And if you think about that on scale with farmers and other water intensive industries, that seems like a really, really smart first step.
We're looking for ways to help, I think, give people in cities the feeling that they have like some buy-in into this, because obviously a very significant amount of our water use is in the agricultural space, and we really need to hone in there. But we need to be partners, and we need to have everyone working towards this. And it feels difficult for a single person to make an impact, but I'm looking for some ways to try and help people to feel like when they do save water, that it's actually making a direct difference. So like leading to some water getting released from reservoirs or something. So I've been having some conversations with folks at Salt Lake City and some other water conservancy districts and that sort of thing to see if there are ways to work around that, because it's important to give people that feeling that what they're actually doing counts, because kind of the individual action is a big focus of a lot of legislators here in Utah. And so we need to help move that along.
Yeah, and if there's other things too that people can do to help conserve water at scale too. I mean, yeah, keep us posted on legislation for next session that you might be introducing and how we can support that, because it's so important. I mean, it's really received a lot of national attention over the last few years, and it's a huge issue for Utah. So thank you for giving us a little update on that. And I wanted to talk about public lands, because 65% of Utah are federally protected public lands. And it's a contentious issue at the legislature. And so I guess I'm curious, how do you reconcile the complex relationship between the state and the federal government for our public lands?
Yeah, it's challenging, and it's gotten, I think, worse as the rhetoric gets heated up. I mean, we have basically an entire office at the state level devoted to essentially filing lawsuits against the federal government over public lands issues. PLPCO, the Public Lands Policy Coordinating Office. They're good people. I've chatted with them about other things. They're good at what they do. I just don't have a lot of appreciation for the the outcomes of those lawsuits. So to me it feels like it's a bit of a wild goose chase. I think these are issues that in a lot of cases have been settled in the past and are really just about dragging up, kind of damaged, hurt feelings about certain lands that have been repurposed for other things. Maybe it's they were overrun with grazing in the past, and we need to set them aside and try and find some other places to let agriculture and some of those free range farmers out there use the land. But I mean, yeah, it's such a contentious issue. And I'd love to see us try and partner better with the federal government. I mean, we have the Federalism Commission here in Utah, which is, again, another commission that's essentially devoted just to pushing back on the federal government. It's legislators, and I think they've brought in some other folks aside from legislators now. And that is a venue that, the rhetoric over the federal government frequently gets pretty heated there. Mm-hmm. There's been accusations that the federal government, whether it's like BLM or Forest Service, have ignored invitations to come and speak to that committee. That's frustrating. I think, if I were in one of those federal government positions, and I saw what Utah was talking about as far as federal overreach and suing over almost anything, I don't know why they would come to those meetings. So I think we need to try and I don't think this is going to happen. But I mean, I think the rhetoric needs to be toned down, and we would find better outcomes if Utah and the folks in these positions that are dealing with federal lands litigation and all that sort of stuff, if we could find ways to sit down, have good conversations with the feds, rather than just file lawsuits and talk about federal overreach. It's not working right now.
No, and it's such a waste of taxpayer dollars. I mean, I think that's the part that bothers me the most, is that we're suing the EPA. Like, most Utahns want EPA air quality standards, and it seems like a huge waste of taxpayer resources and our hard-earned dollars to use that money to sue the federal government. And I also think this is why it's so important that we have a U.S. senator who's a champion for public lands, because with so much of Utah being federal public lands, we need someone who's going to sit on a budget and appropriations committee who can help bring more funding to help address the backlog and the management and the upkeep, and someone that can bring those resources home to Utah rather than people who are just fighting that. And that's such an interesting thing I've been thinking about with the role as a U.S. senator, is just like, so many of the states east of the Mississippi have zero public land, and so it's not in their interest at all to fund public lands. But what our public lands really need is a bit more funding to help do some cool stuff, like signs and trails and things that are really good for our health, for our mental health, physical health, for air. And they also, and it's great for the economy, like that
Yeah.
kind of trail development, that those kinds of things we could do. They really spur a lot of economic development. They increase property values, and it really is a win-win with outdoor recreation.
Yeah.
And so when people talk about the balance between like mining and fracking and outdoor rec and tourism, like I think it's kind of a false dichotomy because so many of our people that work on the land, like miners and frackers that work in the fall, they're also devoted outdoor recreationalists.
Yep.
And we really have a lot more common. It is a great unifier.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much work to be done on restoration of some of these lands, of wildfire mitigation. That's a huge carbon issue. If we're talking about setting aside lands and then that land catches on fire and it burns a bunch of extra deadfall out there, I mean, we're releasing more carbon than we would to begin with. So yeah, there's so many different conversations to have. We need to find some more common ground with folks like hunters and anglers. I've talked to a number of different kind of fishing groups here in Utah that talk about access issues, and there's this whole idea of corner crossing. I don't know if have you heard of corner crossing or this policy issue at all?
I mean, I worked for the governor's office in 2010 when the private property access issue for the streams went into effect.
Yeah.
And so I was like leading a lot of meetings between anglers and private property owners during that time. I don't know if it's related to that, but I'm not sure. Tell me what this issue is.
It's just an interesting one. It's like, so the way the federal lands were set aside were in these checkerboard parcels. So you've got like piece here and a piece here, and they only touch at the corner. And there's this question as to whether you can step over the corner and like literally just like we're talking about like a map, but like the actual physical presence on the map, and like whether that constitutes trespassing on private land because these adjacent parcels are private. And so there's been this legal question. I don't know where it stands. It's just really interesting to me from like a kind of legal perspective and like trying to get access, because there's parcels that you might have a big chunk of federal lands up in like a mountain range, but if you can't get there because of these checkerboard arrangements and the question over trespassing on private land, then that that land's still important because it's providing habitat and all that, but you can't get there to hunt or to fish or to recreate. So I think that's more of a federal issue. So good luck taking that on.
Thank you. Well, no, it's something I was on the board for the Wasatch Backcountry Alliance for many years too. And it's something, there's so many places, like even some place like Grizzly Gulch, which is a really popular place for backcountry skiing. It's where so many of our avalanche courses operate out of. And even that, which is like a trailhead that has been used for decades, over a century. It was like one of the beginning places for snow science research in North America. It's very historic. Even there, it's super hard for people to know like where the public land is and where like the lines. It's really it's complicated, the mapping.
Well, the parking situation is its own mess up there right now. So
we need to work on that for sure. That's a whole nother podcast, I feel like. We could go,
its own podcast for sure.
That could be its own podcast for sure. I've been to a lot of meetings about that issue, and I am frustrated that we don't have a good outcome yet. But it's kind of sad. I've kind of resigned myself. I don't really go ski there that much anymore because it's so complicated. Like it takes so much. Yeah. Yes. So I was curious if you could talk. Last year, the state legislature passed some of the most extremist legislation that we've seen. And you passed a lot of bills too.
Almost 590 or something.
I think it was almost 600. So, but were there some good bills that were passed by the legislature? Maybe you can speak to those.
Yeah. So there's, I mean, a lot of bills, most bills, 90% or something are almost unanimous bipartisan type bills. It's only like the 10% or so that get controversial. One bill I've actually been talking a lot about recently with some stakeholders is this portable benefits idea. So this is about gig workers and folks, that aren't full-time employed with the company. They can't get benefits in most situations. Maybe they're working 10 or 20 hours a week. It's just or they have two jobs. They're working 30 hours a week between the two jobs, but neither qualify for full-time benefits. And so trying to find ways to allow them to access benefits is huge. So actually Senator Johnson, someone I frequently disagree with on many things, passed a good bill on portable benefits that allows companies to set aside money and put it into benefits accounts for these gig workers. And it makes it very clear that just this one action doesn't constitute like a full employment contract, because that's kind of been the question. And then once you get over that threshold, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that comes into play. And so it's this interesting balance of like, you don't want people circumventing that and undercutting protections that these folks should have. But then kind of in conversations I've had with some of the companies that are actually enacting this stuff and using the legislation, their perspective and what they're hearing from their not employees, their contractors, is that these aren't folks who want full-time jobs. They just want the flexibility of having 10 hours a week for this one gig or something like that. And it would still be nice to have some money set aside. And so there's still going to be work done on making sure those accounts have like the same tax advantages as a 401k or, a healthcare savings account or something. And so it's just creating a new kind of framework that allows people who aren't in that full-time position to tap into some good benefits, because that's super important. And to not having health insurance, not having a retirement account, I mean, that's going to be devastating for most people at some point in their life.
Yeah, I feel like so many of my friends, and myself included, work in that gig economy. And so that's great. What are some other bills you're thinking about running with the upcoming legislative session?
Yeah, let me jump over my screen here because I've filed more than I planned to already, which doesn't mean every one of them is going to go forward. But I'm always working on energy and electricity stuff. So trying to do some work on transmission still and making sure that we're getting the most out of our transmission system and hopefully opening up some more pathways for new transmission infrastructure, because if we're going to connect more clean energy to the grid, we've got to have that backbone to be able to actually get it onto the grid and get it to customers. So that's always something I'm working on. I've got a bill open on paid family leave and making sure that private employers can actually get the sorts of this is an interesting situation where like there's a little bit of unclarity about whether they can access insurance to provide family leave to folks. There's this kind of weird dynamic there. So trying to make sure that it's clear so that companies can get this insurance they need to provide paid family leave to employees. That's going to be an important one. It should be a pretty small one. That actually does a lot of good. And then let's see, one other, I've got like 10 in front of me that I've opened up. I don't want to go and do them all, but one I started working on last year that's relevant right now, especially with Pioneer Day coming up and just past the 4th, is fireworks related. And I don't think I've heard any feedback from constituents in a positive light about fireworks in the entire time I've been elected. It is always concerns, and we see every year, we see houses burned down, we see wildfires started. We need to get at the supply side of that. Implementing restrictions is fine, but people just ignore them. So we actually, we need to make it harder to purchase, in my opinion. And the way the sellers are licensed is pretty complex. You see those folks out in Smith's parking lots and that sort of thing. And so it's hard to like put a direct tax on the fireworks themselves because the tax collection aspect is a little bit wishy-washy, and that might be another thing to look at. But they do have to purchase a business license. And so looking at those licensing fees and seeing if there's a better structure there, some more opportunities to hopefully, in my opinion, limit sales, because I think it's ridiculous what we're seeing, especially in the last few years, especially with drought and climate change, and we see all these we see insurance issues where people can't get home insurance because of wildfire issues. So anyway, I think that's an area that needs to be worked on, and it is something I've had overwhelmingly positive feedback on when I talk about making it a little bit more difficult to set off fireworks at any given moment, because I hear them all the time this time of the year, and it's not legal. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so, especially a year like this where we haven't really had usually in July in Utah, we get this sort of summer monsoonal pattern where we get these afternoon thunderstorms and showers, but this year's been so dry and we just haven't had much rain at all. And so things are real crispy right now. It's like a tinderbox out there for sure.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
um,
definitely worried about Pioneer Day coming up. I'll be in DC actually. I'm flying out on the 24th, so hopefully I'll avoid any smoke that comes in, but we'll see.
no, it's always scary this time of year. Those brush fires in the foothills that start, and then, yeah, I mean, the 2 years ago when we had the Parley's Canyon fire, that one was really scary for us.
Yeah.
I was like going through my house and GoProing everything. So I had a record in case the house went on fire. And yeah, it was really scary. So
Have you seen any increase in your home insurance?
I need to check on that. That's a great question.
Yeah, because
I should look up that.
that's
Yeah.
been hitting Utah where people are either getting denied, I think, insurance on new builds, or seeing pretty drastic increases if they're in wildfire prone areas. And that's an issue that folks are looking at. I brought that up with the insurance commissioner, and he said another representative is looking at it in a good way. So expect to see some work there too, because we do need to make sure that we need to make sure people can get insurance, but also that we're not building in really stupid places.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, there's so much more about wildfire resilience and adaptation that the state government and the federal government could be doing to help homeowners. Because when you look at the cost, like we're going to redo our back deck, and in order to use material that is rated for the wild land, for the urban interface, it's a lot more expensive. And there's a lot of things you can do to make your house more fireproof, but it adds up. So it
Yeah,
would be great if I think that the putting in a little bit of money to help homeowners on the front end could really help.
yeah, that's an
It's less,
interesting.
yeah, less money
Yeah.
than if you try to rebuild houses on the back end.
That's an interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of about that actually. Yeah, putting together like a fund for wildfire resilience for homeowners. I would
Yes. Like,
like
yeah, instead of having mulch around your house, you do rocks, and then there's
or a
material you
tax
can
credit or something.
there's like shingles, special shingles, and then there's like paint and special treatment you can do on your exterior and all
Love
these
it.
different things. So I've just been so worried about it here, and I've been looking because like, yes, there's the lowering and reducing emissions portion of addressing the climate crisis, but we also really need to be thinking about adaptation and resilience and putting a lot of thought into shaping policies because these policies will be with us for a long time. And yeah, the sooner we can do it, the better. So whether that's planting trees in urban areas that don't have many to help create more shade, or yeah, I guess I spend a lot of time thinking about these kinds of things. So yeah.
Me too. That's what I do when I'm running. So
Yes. And then also, I mean, my heart just breaks for our population that is experiencing homelessness in this heat that we've been having. So
oh man. Yeah,
more
I was just
support for
seeing a
that.
conversation online about another Utah city banning camping, and I get that, but the expression was, "Oh, we're going to ban camping, and we're going to help these people find the resources they need." And I looked at the ordinance, and there's nothing about actually helping it. It's just saying you can't camp here. And this is a city that doesn't have any resources. I mean, the resources we have for shelters and that sort of thing are very concentrated actually in the area that I represent, especially in South Salt Lake, but also Salt Lake City. And Mill Creek has been a proactive player there as well. So yeah, on homelessness, certainly, especially this time of the year, and when it's very cold, it's a danger to be out there.
It is. I mean, Utah would be a really tough place to be experiencing homelessness. And I just can't help but think about how many families are on the brink of that too, with the price of housing and rent. It's ridiculous. And Denver and Colorado they've done some cool things where they gave every person like $1,000 a month, and it's actually for housing, and it's actually a lot less expensive than trying to run these shelters. But I
Yeah.
guess the part that bothers me is it's like with so many of our state legislative leaders being involved in development and housing, I just feel like there's been enough cases where I've heard of like some corruption where like the funds have been mismanaged and they've gone to like the wrong channels. I'm like, we got to do better. Like, can't we just give people that are on the brink the money directly instead of trying to build stuff that takes decades and never actually gets done? I don't know. That's
Yeah.
just where my brain goes.
No, that's a risk when you have people that are both allocating, millions of dollars from a state government and also have a potential vested interest in securing some of that funding for projects that they are going to benefit from. That happens. In some cases, I think it's fine. In some cases, it's transparent. It goes through the right process, whatever. In some cases, I think maybe there are strings that get pulled that are inappropriate, and I don't have specific allegations about that, but it's something we have heard about. So
I think there's been some reporting about it, about some mismanagement, and yeah, there's just so many developers in the Utah State Legislature, like realtors and developers,
Mhm.
that I would like to see a little bit better ethics and codes about that so that we can avoid any corruption or lack of transparency. So let's see. Do you want to talk about gerrymandering?
Yeah, I always want to talk about gerrymandering. It's the biggest issue we've got in Utah right now.
It is. It's been a huge impediment to having representation.
Yeah.
So recently, the Utah Supreme Court unanimously ruled against the legislature's efforts to gerrymander Utah's congressional and legislative districts, potentially paving the way for Democrats to pick up a congressional seat and several seats in the legislature in the next few years. So, what are your thoughts on that and for what it means for the future of Utah politics?
Yeah, so it's gigantic. I mean, this is an issue we've been working on for 7 years or so, at least. I mean, I remember folks I've worked with, folks I know you've worked with, have been deep into this, into the process of bringing an initiative forward and passing it, and then working on kind of communicating it out and making sure people know that the legislature is stomping on it. And so, I mean, it has the potential to really reshape the representation in Utah. I think we've seen Republicans really hit back hard against this and frankly say some really inappropriate things about our judicial system, which is really well respected here in Utah. We have great judges. The appointment process is pretty fair and nonpartisan. These are people I trust. These are people that Republicans have always said they respected. And so when you have a unanimous decision and you see Republicans lashing out against the court and threatening to make changes there, I think that's a sign of where we are as a state, and it's really damaging. And so, yeah, the decision that, and so Republicans have also been saying this decision is going to like totally reshape the state's policy landscape. It's not. It is a very important decision, but it's very tailored. It is very specific to ballot initiatives that are about reforming government. And that doesn't take into account, in my understanding, things like medical marijuana or abortion issues. It is about kind of voting and procedural stuff about how we actually govern the state. Which is critical because that's how you get good representation that then can legislate on these other policy issues. But in and of itself, it is not this like sea change in the policy landscape. And Republicans have been saying that to fearmonger and I think try and bring people over to their side and scare them into not supporting this path for redistricting specifically, and that's frustrating. So we need to be careful about communicating that out and making sure people kind of understand what this actually means, because it is a really big deal, but it is not this like overturning of the state's policy landscape.
No, I mean, it's like a wonky issue when you get into the nuts and bolts of it, because the way that we got this thing to get fair districts was through a ballot initiative. And so the Supreme Court case is really more about the ballot initiative process and not allowing the state legislature to like dilute or erode the people's will in the ballot initiatives that they pass, which is what the Utah State Legislature did. It's like 2018, Prop 4 passed, which established the Independent Redistricting Commission. And then the next year, the state legislature passed a bill to make that advisory. And that's where the unconstitutionality came from. But again, it's like when you have 30, like people's attention spans now are so short, it's so hard to explain it. But I
Yeah.
attended the Supreme Court hearing, and it was a really interesting discussion. Again, like
Yeah.
super like wonky a little bit, but it really comes down to like representation and the power of a vote because I mean, not like, yeah, it's really important. And, you think about 4th of July, it's July, and you think about what led us to leave, like to fight the war to become an independent nation. And it
Yeah.
was, no taxation without representation. And I feel like that's something that we feel here in Utah.
Yeah, I
Sure.
mean, like the stadium issue, for instance, and people feel very that's a taxation issue that people feel very underrepresented on, and that's something that well, that's a I digress on that issue.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing, but it's an interesting one to think about. So yeah, I mean, we need. My perspective is, we need balance, regardless of, and I hear this from Republicans I speak with, not in the legislature, but like normal Republicans, average Republicans, voters, they want, balance. They don't want these extreme things that are getting passed. They want to see checks and balances. Democrats are not going to have a majority in the legislature anytime soon, frankly, but we should to overcome that supermajority. Utah would still be a conservative state. We would still, probably pass conservative policies, but it gives an actual check on the Republicans and maybe mitigates some of the most extreme stuff that comes through there. And with the districts drawn the way they are right now, it's almost impossible to even get back up to those levels. We're a little over half in each chamber of what we would need to get above the supermajority. And so I think
Mm.
just having fair districts would get us maybe 3/4 of the way there. And then you get some actual pushback. And I mean, frankly, you give the governor some cover to veto things, which is important because he is
Mm.
rolled over on everything, including endorsing Trump, it looks like this morning. I'll just
Mm.
note that. And so, yeah, it's just been disappointing to see that party go further and further to the right and not be able to check with any authority there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this last legislative session was just a horror show to watch from the
Yeah,
outside. And when you think about government overreach and you have the bathroom bill, like seems
yeah,
like the most invasive form of government overreach that you
yeah.
could conceptualize. And so for a state that supposedly wants small, limited government, it's hard for me to understand why we are telling people what books they can and cannot read and what bathrooms to go to and all of these things. So,
They're
um,
just
it's
wedge issues. They're literally they are just designed to cause fear and create division and get people into their political homes and stick there and not listen to other people. I mean, I was,
yeah,
I don't know why, but I listened to Trump's speech at the RNC last night, and the loudest applause lines were for when he talked about bans against transgender athletes. And I'm like,
mm,
this is not an issue that affects almost anyone. Like, why is this an actual thing that we are talking about at any level of government?
yeah, it's because it's about controlling women.
Yeah,
That's really what it's about. I mean, when you
sick.
think about just like the hierarchy or coming from an outdoor preparedness perspective and thinking about like wilderness first aid or something like that, or just, any situation where you have a lot of pressing issues, you triage, right? It's like in this
Yeah,
whole scale of triage, the transgender athlete participation is such a low issue. And it's like, also, I just really think the sports agency should deal with it because it's super
right.
creepy if these mostly male legislators are like talking about women and it's gross. So
This
anyway,
panel, yeah, the panel that measures people and stuff. It's like seriously, really
creepy.
nasty, creepy, gross stuff. Yeah, yeah, you're right. The high school athletic association was doing a fine job managing it before the legislature got involved.
Yeah, but again, it's like it's not the male athlete, the men's
No,
sports that they're worried about. It's
no,
women, and it's just super creepy and really weird, and also opens the door to a lot of sexual abuse and assault, which is a huge issue in women's sports.
right.
And just yeah, it's well, we that's another podcast. It's just I don't know. It's we gotta get the government back on track to addressing the most pressing issues facing Utahns and Americans and
Yeah.
to stay out of these creepy, weird fringe issues that are really non-issues. So
Yep.
I
Yep.
wanted to ask you, okay, what advice would you give to someone thinking about running for office?
Yeah, do it. Don't wait to get involved. There are so many things you can do to kind of start building up to that level. You can serve on city and county boards and commissions, nonprofit boards, all that sort of stuff. There are causes out there that are going to be aligned with the things that you want to work on. So getting involved in those ways and finding kind of those first steps and building those networks and relationships and learning about the issues, that's super important. And I would definitely encourage doing that. And I would say really think about what level of government you are most interested in working at. So for me, like state level was where it was at. I was never super interested in running for like a city council or something because the state addresses the issues that I am most concerned about: climate, energy, water. I mean, those are most directly addressed by the legislature, and so that was why I went in that direction. If you're concerned about street safety, housing, and things that are like directly in your community, then cities are an absolutely perfect place to look at running for office. I would say it's a little crazy to jump in at the federal level, so good luck.
Thank you. I've always wanted to be a senator, so a U.S. senator. I've always wanted to work in Congress, so
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it's but no, I think that's something a lot of people don't think about is like they just want to be involved, and that's great, but like take a second and figure out like who is working on the issues that you want to focus on, and then go down that path. If you want to be in the legislature because you're concerned about homelessness in the state, or the Great Salt Lake, or energy issues, then do an internship through the University of Utah if you're a student. Find a job working in that space. Get a master's degree. That's easier said than done. I know it's not easy for everyone, but just taking these steps that aren't necessarily the actual campaign. Building up to it is important, and having a little bit of a background. That's not to say like the barrier is not as high as people think it is. Like we have a lot of frankly unqualified people as elected officials. So like, don't think you have to be some crazy expert and know everything. But the steps you can take are going to be important in kind of setting you up for success and making sure you kind of know what the different things you're going to be seeing are.
Yeah, I think government at its core should be a way for folks to help solve problems that they see in their community and in their, in society today. And so, whatever your background or experience, like, don't be afraid to jump in because I think a lot of people are afraid to get political, but really getting political is everything is political. Like how your water gets to your house and your electricity, everything is political. So, it's whatever your background or experience, your voice is needed in politics today.
Yeah,
And
you don't need a doctorate, you don't need a master's degree. Sometimes it helps if you want to be that expert, that's great. But yeah, we need good people. I think first and foremost, good people are going to make better decisions than people who have an
agreed,
agenda. So that's what
agreed.
I'd like to see more of. And I guess I didn't mention get involved in the campaign. Go talk to voters because that's going to be important too. Go knock doors for Caroline or someone else and hear what people are actually saying.
Yeah, we'd love to have you join us. Well, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. Anything else you want to add?
Oh, I could go for days, but no, it's always fun to talk with like-minded folks who are involved in politics and working towards a lot of the same issues. So I appreciate having an outlet here, and yeah, I would just encourage folks reach out to me, reach out to Caroline. reach out to whoever is your representative at different levels of government, and let us know how we're doing, and try and get involved. Yeah, it's great to have more. The more involvement, the better. The more people that vote, the better. I'm sick and tired of the elitist attitude from folks. We need to get away from that.
Awesome. Well, how can we follow what's the best way to follow your work?
Oh man, I mean Twitter.
Yeah.
You can follow me on Twitter. Is probably the most active, and probably one of the most active, if not the most active tweeter X in the legislature.
I still say Twitter.
It's Twitter. It's always
What's your
Twitter.
What's your handle? I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, Nate for Utah.
Awesome.
So you can find me there. My contact information is all public too. So that's kind of a fun thing. Also a little bit scary into the political climate to have your address and phone number and everything publicly available, but you can find that easily if you put me into Google, and I'd love to hear from folks.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Keep in touch. Would love to get out, and good luck with the puppy.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see you up in the mountains soon, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Have a great rest of your day.